When this man was talking about the way that the politicians are talking about each other, look at the media shit that's coming down right now. Look how the mainstream media talks about us, and how we're portrayed. Not us talking about ourselves, them talking about us and identifying whether we're worthy of a fucking public housing unit or whether we're worthy of a shelter bed. Or whether we're left-handed, right-handed, a veteran priority, chronic homeless priority. We're all a priority. We should all be able to get a decent place to live. And what is wrong with the government wanting its people to be educated, healthy, and well-housed? How is that considered bad?
That sounds like communism.
Well, yeah, and you know what? We do $144 billion a year in housing subsidies for homeowners.
Right.
We do $34 billion a year in housing subsidies for poor people, but it's the poor people's housing subsidies that we call charity, and that we do means tests on, and that we do you have a felony background? How many toothbrushes in your goddamn bathroom? For the $144 billion that we spend every year on subsidizing homeownership, nobody gets asked shit. It's run by the IRS. So it isn't that we can't afford to subsidize housing for people. It's that we have a priority that the only housing that's worthwhile is the housing that's a commodity. And that subsidizing housing for wealthy people means the real estate industry and the mortgage industry and the banking industry are making money, so therefore it's good. And therefore it's the American dream. But when you're subsidizing housing for poor people, it's poor people's communities that benefit. There's economic development attached to building affordable housing in low-income neighborhoods, attached to opening grocery stores, attached to daycare centers and healthcare clinics. That's economic development for your community. But in our case, it's called welfare, and it's called charity, and it's about whether or not we're good enough to deserve it. And so we felt like as we saw this sort of the federal government in '87, all of a sudden they're funding shit. And when Feinstein started funding shit, all of a sudden they were telling us as the front line at Hospitality House that we had to ask you your name, your date of birth, and your name, and your social security number. And we had to record it, and we had to give it to them so that they could make sure that we weren't double dipping and saying that we were sheltering people. All this crap and all these rules. We used to do the intakes at 11:30. You know why? Because we're fucking adults. So 11:30, 11 o'clock is about when you're going to be going to bed. Now you're doing 4 o'clock intakes and shit at South of Market MSC. Why? So that people ain't out in the street when the suckers are walking to the BART station at the end of work.
Right.
And then after they're gone, you can go back out. What the fuck? Like at some point, we got to get into a social justice system here and a social justice organizing campaign. And you can't, we started the coalition because we felt like this was getting lost in the mix and that we were starting to create a whole tier of existence called homelessness with its own welfare system attached to it, with it all being about dysfunctional poor people and their inability to stay housed. But when you look at the numbers and when you look at the funding streams and when you look at the gentrification and you look at the business improvement districts, it ain't about us. And we're not going to be able to, we ain't no more screwed up and we ain't no better than anybody else, housed or unhoused. And the idea that the destruction of public housing isn't a homeless issue, and that for those of us that come from the street and that have been homeless, the destruction of public housing needs to be our issue as well. We can't keep splitting each other up against each other. And we got to be talking about this as a human rights organizing campaign. And so, what we did when we started the coalition was we did the street sheet and we did other ways because we were tired of the way we were being presented in the media. So you can either stay tired and complain about it, or you can start your own newspaper and start your own media and do your own shit. And that was always our thing. Like when housing became to a point where we were too poor to be able to live in the affordable housing that's being built, and most of it is 80 to 120% of median income, and so we are way too poor to live in the overwhelming majority of affordable housing that's being created. we created a housing corporation that funds the shit at our level, and that has it in its mandate to stay at that level. And you know, there is, and we do have the skill set where we can do this shit for ourselves, and we can build power within ourselves. And so, you know, in that vein, at the coalition, we started hooking up with people in Skid Row, and people in Denver, and groups in Denver, and groups in Sacramento, and groups in Portland, Oregon, and groups in Seattle. And we started realizing that there's a way for us to build an organizing campaign that is not just about Ed Lee or the mayor before Ed Lee or the mayor before that or the mayor before that, that we need to build an organizing campaign that is going to start impacting the federal and the state governments and start having a real impact about the cities following our lead in pushing for what it is that we deserve. Instead of us thinking that some freaking mayor or some board of supervisors or, you know, is going to save us from ourselves. That's not how this shit's going to get addressed. And I think after 34 years, you know, the only thing the federal government's done is change who counts as being homeless so that families and youth were no longer considered homeless, instead of actually addressing the increasing numbers of people that are living in our streets. You know, and so about 10 years ago, we started RAP, and I see some of our artworks there and shit like that. Where we brought in hardcore Skid Row type community organizers, where we brought in lawyers, where we brought in artists. You know, we're having an event July 22nd. We'll be doing a mural unveiling right across from the Valencia Street Mission District Police Station around stopping the criminalization of homelessness and poverty.
What time?
I don't know what time yet. I'll get the shit to you guys. We got a bunch of our organizers are coming into town. And so we're having some meetings that day, and then we're going to have a party. We'll get BLO there and shit. And, we do street theater. We don't like to do boring demos. But so, you know, we brought in all of these different skill sets to make ourselves stronger, and we wrote our own legislation that we've been running now for 3 years. We look at the anti-homeless laws, they call them, or the quality of life laws, or the way the Union Square treats anybody that's poor, that's hanging out in Union Square, where you got private security chasing you off and shit. And we talked to 1,600 homeless people, you know, and about their interactions with the cops and with the bid security guys. And 81% said that they're getting arrested, cited, or harassed for sleeping. 76% for sitting, and 74% for loitering, standing fucking still. So when you talk to 1,600 people and those kind of numbers come up, that it's illegal to sleep, it's illegal to sit, it's illegal to stand still, how's that not a Jim Crow campaign or an anti-Okie campaign or a sundown town? If I can't sit, sleep, lay down, stand still, or eat, you're pretty much telling me to get the fuck out of your town. Because we're talking about, whether we feel this or not, we're talking about our freaking money. And the decisions that are being made over how resources are shared and how resources are spread out to a community are humans making those decisions, and they're political in the perspective that they're taking. And we feel really strongly that we're not going to address homelessness without addressing the systemic causes of why so many people are homeless. And that if we can bring all them different groups together into one campaign, we can have a dramatic impact in terms of the power dynamics around decision making.
Is it worth it to even try to grab a hold of the larger?
I mean, I think it's twofold though. I mean, one of the things that struck me when we started the Homeless Coalition was being in the drop-in center, when the drop-in center used to be where the shelter is now, and there were 100 people there a day, and I was from 12 in the afternoon till 4 in the afternoon, the support services specialist, I remember was my title. Because with a GED, you can't call yourself a social worker, apparently. But people, and there was like a big window out to the drop-in center, and people would come in all day long, and they'd be like, "I'm not like those motherfuckers. I'm trying to get my shit together. I'm not, you know." And they're pointing out at their brothers and sisters that are sitting out in the drop-in center. And then the next person comes in. The person that was just saying that shit is sitting out there, and they're saying the same thing. And that, to me, is where the narrative's got to change. You know, and then you have people in public housing or in Section 8 housing that think the homeless people are the fuck-ups. You know, like the narrative's got to change within how we see each other and how we react to each other and how we respond to each other, and then the language will follow. You know, but right now you're pitting veterans against chronic homeless, against youth, against families. The families fucking lose every time, by the way.